Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today we are back with Meridia's Guardian. This is not Meridia's, the same Meridia's Guardian as you guys used to know. I actually dumped the whole build concept because of the changes that came with the Morrowind, and then the changes that came with this update. Really kind of threw that build, I want to say, in the trash because of its design. Not the build's design, the game's changes really kind of put that build off, and I decided to make a new one and a more interesting one to my personal play style that fits within the game's design. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. We're going to take a look at the stats here. As you can see, I have a 14k magicka, a 30k health, a 30k stamina. If I switch to the back bar where I have a two-handed, I have a 30k health, a 30k stamina. And you can see my resistance or my recovery rates change. That's because right now I actually have vigor on my bar with sword and board, and on the back bar I do not have. I have repentance, and repentance boosts all three of my magicka, health, and stamina recovery by 10%. That's why I lose that chunk of recovery, which kind of really throws off the build to a degree. You also notice that my weapon damage changes. On two-handed I have a 1968. On sword and board I have a 2152. Why, might you ask? Well, I'll get to that in a minute. I have a 40% weapon critical. I do have a 27k spell resist with a 26k physical resist on the front bar. On the back, or on the back bar. On the front bar I have a 27k or 26k physical resist with a 26k spell with 25k physical. Wow, I'm all over the place. I am running a Mundus Stone, the Lady, to increase my physical and spell resistance. I do have Major Savagery from Expert Hunter. I have Minor Fortitude, Minor Intellect, Minor Endurance, all from the Repentance, and then of course I am running Tri-Stat Food. So that is the food you're going to want to run, is Tri-Stat. Now I do suggest some potions or some pots. If you have them, tri-pots are really good. But because the build has its own self-sustainability, you don't really need tri-pots. But having a pot that gives you extra magicka and stamina recovery would be really good. And in one, and then maybe like magic recovery, like a magic recovery one or a stamina recovery one would be fine. Either way, just depends on how bad off you are. But you don't really need a full one of those potions that has like 100% uptime of this or that or whatever, because of the design of the build. This is a self-sustaining build, by the way. So if you do lose your healer or you lose a DPS or two in a dungeon, this build can maintain while the healer gets the other people up, because they are that well self-sustaining. So let's go back over to this part. We are going to go take a look at the gear. I am running two 5-piece sets with a monster set, so I run what's called a 5-5-2 on one bar. On the other bar I run a 5-4-2 because I do lose the 5-piece bonus of one of the sets, and I'm fine with that. And it's kind of how this set complements its design. On the two-handed bar, you are mainly focusing on keeping applied damage shields, things like that, on the main bar. On the back bar, where you have the sword and board, you are focusing on applying effect and also damage, which is kind of strange, isn't it? So as you can see, we are running a 2-piece Swarm Others. This is not in the proper setup. You want this one infused, and you want it in heavy. You do want a reinforced heavy shoulders as well. The reason why is because you need the extra resistances, because you don't want to use a monster set that's going to, or a item set that's going to boost your resistances in order to keep this build the way it is. So these two pieces, though, this one reinforced, this one should be infused with a max stamina on it. Over here we have this as well, which is the 5-piece gladiator set. And this, as you can see, we do have all 5 pieces going when we have the sword and board. When we switch over two-handed, we lose the 5-piece bonus of the 1800 weapon damage. But do not fret, because the two-handed will do a lot more damage in the end once it gets turned gold. Mine is not gold, so don't quite reach those weapon damage points I'd like to with this build yet. So moving on, we do have a 5-piece, like I said, gladiators, and we have a belt and a gloves, both light and medium. Medium gloves, light belt, and both Nirnhone. The reason these two are Nirnhone is because you get greater resistance values out of Nirnhone and light and medium on the small pieces than you do with reinforced on heavy. If these were heavy pieces, I would still go Nirnhone because their resistance values are below 2,000. Anything 2,000 or higher, I would go reinforced. Anything below, go Nirnhone. And the reason why is because I could show you guys the difference in them, but I already broke down my Nirnhone pieces. But it was literally like 2,070 something on Nirnhone versus 2,000 and something on the reinforced. I am running a reinforced Plague Doctor's boots with an infused Plague Doctor leggings. So that's where I get my 2-piece, 2 extra pieces for my 5-piece. And you want Plague Doctor up all the time because you need that extra health, because I'm a wood elf. Now if you are playing a different race, there are 3 other races are really good for this build. The Nord, probably one of the better ones. The next one is the Imperial, and then the Orc. The Orc would actually be better than the Imperial on this case, and I know a lot of people would say, why would the Orc be better? The Imperial doesn't get any extra benefits towards health or stamina recovery, that kind of stuff. The Nord and the Orc do. The Imperial just gets extra stamina and magic, or extra health and stamina, and then they get this thing that gives them health back whenever they do a light or heavy attack. The reason why the Nord would work so well is because of the damage reduction. The reason why the Orc would work so well is because of the 4% extra damage they get from weapon abilities, or weapon attacks. So, really good. Also, the Plague Doctor gives you 4% healing received, and I'll go over why that's important with this build here in a second. Moving on, we are running 3 pieces of Plague Doctor jewelry, 2 weapon damage, 1 magic recovery. Yes, this build also works in PvP. I know, right? How can you make a build work in both if you're not wearing in-pin armor or have any in-pin resistance whatsoever? I'll explain that here in a sec. So, all these ones, the reason why you want the greater weapon damage and that 1 little bit of magic recovery is because of the way the build's designed. It's a self-sustaining tank build. It is a very selfish tank build. I know it's bad, but I am not a race that gets a health bonus, so Ebon armor does not work with the Wood Elf at all unless I were to wear Ebon with Plague Doctor. And I'm not going to do that because I can't play that way. Sorry. Moving on down here, we are running a 2-handed Kvetch's Gladiator weapon with weapon damage on it. It is a defending 2-hander because you need those extra resistances. And if you look at the defending, it gives you 2,656 extra defenses, which is almost higher than this. But this gives you 1950, but it gives me an extra 1,500 from the champion point tree on top of that 1950, and that's why I actually run this defending and this way, is so I can keep the comparisons of my resistances really close. Now this is a Nirnhone shield. As I said, anything under 2,000, I always go with Nirnhone, and that's the reason why. It gives you a better increase in value. And this isn't golded out yet. Once I get it golded out, it will be over 2,000 in resistance value. Moving on, we have a Nirnhone sword as well, and it is running a Crusher enchant. The reason we are running a Nirnhone weapon is for that increase in weapon damage. There's a reason why this build uses so much weapon damage, and it isn't just to do damage. It's because of other things, like Vigor is increased by max weapon damage. The other heal I use, Rally, is also boosted by that. Now, you do not have to run Vigor with this. I'll get to that in a second as well. But the Crusher enchant is a definite on all tank builds for right now. It is the best in slot for that because it does apply that extra physical and spell resistance debuff. So, moving on to the skills. And we're going to start with two-handed bar because that is the main bar. So on the two-handed bar, we are running Brawler. We are running Brawler for 2 reasons. One, not just because of the damage it does or the dot, but it is mainly because of the damage shield it does. The damage shield is one of the largest damage shields in the game besides Blazing Shield and Bone Shield. Those are the other 2 that are just as large as this one. Not even the DK's little shield can get reach to the value of Brawler with the amount of, depending on the amount of enemies around. So this one grows based on the amount of enemies you hit, The other one, like the DKs, it's based on your max health. So if you don't have a massive max health pool, it doesn't really work out that great. And it's nothing against the DK, but this with a DK is insane, let me tell you. But Brawler's a really good one because of the fact it does apply a damage shield, and that damage shield is increased by 100% by each enemy hit, and it is increased also by your weapon damage. So the higher the weapon damage, the greater the damage shield. That's why I also run weapon damage on the two-hander, is because if it procs that extra weapon damage, this damage shield grows to about 2,500, 2,300, 2,500, somewhere in there. And then on top of that, every enemy I hit with it increases that shield strength by another 100%. So each enemy hit grows that shield by 100%. Moving on, we are using Rally as our second ability. Now this does grant us Major Brutality for 33 seconds, which is really great. But because of the way Rally works, you heal for so much health over 2 seconds while active, and an additional health when it ends. But if you heal before it ends, or if you wait until the heal ends, you actually heal for 5,000 or 564% more health in proportion to the length of time Rally has been applied. So as long as it's active, whenever you use it a second time, you can actually boost that secondary heal up even higher, depending on the amount of time you let it last. Next up is Blazing Shield. Again, one of the strongest damage shields in the game besides Bone Shield. I say that because I have tanked trials with this build before, or with something similar. But when you're in a trial and you have tons of enemies on you or around you, and you fire off this shield, especially in like Hellraw Citadel, Ethereum Sanctum, and Sanctum Ophidium, those three main ones, and Maw, you get a lot of ads around you, and those ads help this shield like grow super powered. So really good, powerful shield. I say it's one of the most powerful shields in the game. I know a lot of people might disagree with me, but it is one of the most powerful shields because of the purpose of it's a 33%, but I do have Bastion in my champion points, which it boosts it by 3% of my max health. But for each enemy nearby, the shield strength grows again by another 4% for each enemy. So for each enemy, I get 4% extra damage shields. And then on top of that, when the shield expires, it explodes outwards, dealing 52% of the damage back to the nearby enemies. And it has a chance of proccing Burning Light. When you deal damage with an Ajax ability, you have a 25% chance to deal an extra 3,744 weapon damage, or physical damage, which also grows based on weapon damage. So that's 4,025 right there that I can do out. And that does crit. So I can get upwards to 8,000 out of it, on top of the Blazing Shield damage, which can crit as well. And sometimes I can get upwards to, like, 25k out of it. It's pretty interesting. On top of that, I do have Piercing Spear, which increases my critical damage done by 10%. That's why we have the two-handed bar with the lower weapon damage, is because we get 10% more damage from having an Ajax Spear ability slotted, so we can get those extra damage on Brawler for the cleave attack and the bleed, and also your light and heavy attacks. Moving on, we have Repentance. Repentance is going to be a group heal. It is also going to restore your stamina back to you if there's any enemies nearby that are dead. It's a really good way to keep your resources maximized, especially in trash fights. On top of that, it also gives you minor fortitude, minor endurance, and minor intellect, which give you those three things in recovery by 10%. Moving on, we have Evil Hunter. Now this is a really good ability for a tank, because tanks don't want to use potions that boost their damage. They want to use potions that give them like really good recovery rates, things like that, so they can boost that recovery rate to keep those resources coming in. This is really good for them because it gives them a chance to boost their critical, but it also gives them the ability to expose stealth characters, including NPCs. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but there is a couple NPCs inside of dungeons that go stealth. They start sharpening their daggers. You'll see these little red sparks in the area around you, but you won't see the enemy. If you use this, it'll show them, and you can do damage to them. Really, really good ability to have for those particular moments. Next up, we are running Warhorn. I do not have aggressive Warhorn yet because I just unlocked Warhorn about a week ago, and I haven't been running with it on my bar because when I usually solo play, and I don't run this exact build when I solo play, I just change a few pieces and I'm done, and I just go out in the world and I play. So really kind of a powerful thing here. But I do want to get aggressive Warhorn for the 8% uptime. Now it does take me a little bit more time to build my Warhorn up, but not by much of that on somebody using a heroic slash tank. So moving on to the back bar, we are running Pierce Armor. Now we run Pierce Armor for the purpose of breaking the enemy's armor, which reduces their major physical and spell resistance by 5,280 for 12 seconds. But keep an eye on that 12 seconds when you're tanking, because it can come off before your taunt wears off, and you want to keep it applied. Try to keep it up every 12 seconds. Keep this applied. This ability can also do upwards to 10k damage. Just saying. Upwards. Next up, we have Deep Slash. Now, I don't use Heroic Slash for a lot of different reasons. You can use Heroic Slash if you want to. The reason I don't is because I like to apply Minor Maim to multiple enemies, and I think that's a lot better than applying it to a single enemy when you're trying to get multiple enemies applied with it. I don't want to waste my resources trying to get this applied to multiple enemies when I can just hit 3 right off the bat, move on to the next group, hit 3 more, kind of thing. I also get the ability to reduce their movement speed by 60% for 12 seconds. It's a really good CC for that. But yeah, really effective. Does a decent amount of damage too. Moving on, we have our Restoring Focus. Now there's a huge reason why we want to have this down most of the time. It gives you Major Ward, Major Resolve. It lasts, even if you move out of the circle, it lasts up to 8 seconds. The buffs last on you for 8 seconds, so you can move out of the circle and move back into the circle, move out and move back, and keep that Major Ward and Resolve all the time. Plus Minor Vitality, which increases your healing received by 9%, and Minor Protection, which reduces the damage taken by 8%. Really, really powerful. Like I said, with a Nord, they get, and everyone says it's a multiplicative bonus from the Nord on into the resistances. Sorry, I hate to say it, it is a 6% increase. You just don't notice it most of the time because your damage reduction is calculated in a different way than your damage mitigation. So you don't really notice it either way. It's just not enough. So, but you will notice this 8% damage reduction on this ability here. Now, next up is Vigor. You can have Vigor here, or you can put Repentance here as well. It's up to you if you want those extra recovery rates, or if you want to help your group out a little bit more with that high heal. Also, on top of that, if you also buff up with Rally, switch bars, and then use Vigor, Vigor hits for about 8k. So it's a very powerful heal, and it helps your group a lot. So, and that's one of the other reasons why we have such a high stamina. Next up, we have Evil Hunter again, and then here we have Flawless Dawnbreaker. The reason why I run Flawless Dawnbreaker is mainly because of trash. When you're in Dungeons and Trials, most of the time you're fighting Daedra and Undead, so when you get to trash packs, you can drop a Dawnbreaker and boom, be full on stamina again, or on ultimate again, because you're getting 9 ultimate for every kill. So it's pretty good to have Dawnbreaker, and that's one of the reasons why I use a lot of AoE stuff, because any enemy you hit, you will get that bonus ultimate back. So the more enemies you hit, Deep Slash is really good for that, and Brawler is really good for that. And then also light and heavy attacks on the two-handed is really good with getting those multiple enemies hit. So you can generate the ultimate from the Fighters Guild under Banish with Wicked. You generate 9 ultimate when you kill an undead Daedra or werewolf. So getting as many hits off as you can really helps you generate ultimate, and that's how this build works, is it's based on building ultimate through those factors. A lot of the enemies inside of some of the trials even are undead, so really, really good on that. And that is the skills, guys. We are going to go take a look at the champion points now. For a champion point, starting with the Steed, we have 23 in Ironclad. We do get 8% from that circle restoring focus, so we don't need the 20% in here. We could go 12 if you wanted, but then you would give up other benefits elsewhere. and we'll be going over those in a second. So this is kind of important to have it about 10, because you get 18% out of it, which is pretty decent. That's why I said a Nord would be one of the better options, because you get that 6% on top of it, which is 24% damage reduction. Like I said, you wouldn't notice it, that 4%, but you would notice that 2% taking you over 20%. So you will notice the damage reduction from that. But really good setup here. Next up we have Spell Shield. This one increases your spell resistance by 1003. Just enough to get you over that hill, to get you closer to the higher cap on resistances. Moving on over here, we have Hardy and Elemental Defender, both at 43, both giving us 10% damage reduction on top of the other damage reduction from direct damage. But this one also gets that 8% when it's applied by, if you just have these by themselves. You're not taking direct damage, you're just taking disease or damage over time or whatever. And then we have 23 into Thick Skin, giving us a 10% there. And Thick Skin does stack with Hardy and Elemental Defender, so does Ironclad stack with these two, and so does that 8%. So you would be getting technically 28% damage mitigation with all three of these. So, or with these three and these three kind of thing. So, moving on over here, we have 23 in the Bastion, giving us a 10% damage reduction, or damage effectiveness to our damage shield. So it's an increase to our damage shield, 10%. It's a really, really good one to have. And if you can get more into it, the better, to be honest. But honestly, tanks don't need that much. The healers probably need more out of it, or if you're playing a light armor tank. Moving on, Expert Defender reduces the damage taken from light and heavy attacks by 10%. Remember, most enemies in the game, doesn't matter what they are, do light and heavy attacks a majority of the time. So I don't only get 10% here, I get 20% because of direct damage, because all light and heavy attacks are direct damage, so that is 20%. Then I get Hardy, which is 30%, and I get another 8%, which is 38% damage mitigation or reduction right there. Boom. And I will take very little damage from light and heavy attacks. Moving on, we have Heavy Armor Focus of 39, which gives us a 3,315 extra physical resistance in the heavy armor. Since I'm a Templar, it's harder for me to get high spell resistance because my class comes innate with an extra spell bonus in spell resistance. This is a way to boost up my physical resistance and get it up so it is up there with that spell resistance. Moving on to the Green Tree, we have 23 into Warlord, which gives us 10% reduced cost and break free. Don't worry about this, you won't be breaking free from a lot of things, but having that 10% reduced cost really does help. Bashing Focus, reduce cost bash by 10%. Since you do run a sword and board, it's really nice to use that sword and board to interrupt enemies. So bashing them really helps. And having that reduced cost, along with reduced cost from the skill line of sword and board, helps as well. Moving over here, we only have 23 into Mooncalf, 23 in Arcanus, because we are wearing one piece light, one piece heavy, or one piece medium. We get 4% reduced cost or increased recovery already from those. So we only need another 6% to get it up to 10% reduced or increased recovery rate. Now what I'm going to do is when I get more points, I'm going to start putting them into these to take these up to 11%. So I get a 15% increased recovery rate in Magicka and Stamina. And that's what I'm going to do with my next probably 4 or 5 updates. Okay, moving on, Tenacity. We have 10% here by putting 43 points. This increases our Magicka and Stamina return from our fully charged heavy attacks by 10%. I am in heavy armor, so I get 25%. That is 35%, and I get another 30% just for doing a heavy attack. That is a 55 or 65% increase in my return. It is a very important reason that I have those recovery rates that I do at that level of stamina, because my stamina is super low. Having a little bit higher stamina recovery gives me greater return in the long run. So moving on, we have 21 into Befoul, giving us a 21% increase effectiveness on of your healing reduction abilities. This includes Reverberating Bash, which this is one of the main reasons why I do run a sword and board, is for Reverberating Bash. As you can see, it gets a 36% reduced healing received for 10 seconds. This is one of the longest applied major defiles, besides one other that I think is like 15 seconds or 10 seconds. But because of this, it really helps when you're fighting dungeon bosses that do have that extra healing. You can swap this out for Deep Slash just for that boss, or you can swap it out for Vigor just for that boss kind of thing, just so you can keep that applied. Going back into here, we have 15 into tumbling. I am going to take this up to 10% with the next, with the city of Clockwork City. I am going to take this up to 10%, and that's going to take 23 points. So the reason why is because reducing the cost of dodge roll is important on a tank, because you do need to dodge roll some attacks. Not all, just some. So, moving on, Shadow Ward, I have a 56 points in here for a 20% reduced cost in blocking. If you guys don't know, wearing heavy armor, before I go on the next page, because I don't have anything into Bless, there's a reason why I don't. Wearing heavy armor, I get a 9% healing received. For wearing heavy armor, I get another 9% for standing in that circle. That is 18%, and I get 4% for wearing Plague Doctors. That is a 22% healing received. My rally can heal me from 0, and if I crit heal with it, it can heal me all the way up to 100 or up to 20 or 20 to 25k health, like that. It's a very, very powerful heal. So that's why I don't have anything in the Blessed. So my Vigor, what it says is what it does, 8k. Moving on over here, we have 47 into Physical Weapon Expert for a big reason. 25% increased damage in your light and heavy attacks. When using it two-handed, you get multiple enemies hit with light and heavy attacks, so you can cleave enemies not only in dungeons but also in the open world and also in trials. So you can get a lot of AoE damage off from your light and heavy attacks. Because you have 2 damage shields applied, you can keep them up pretty much almost 100% of the time, mitigating almost all damage you take. So this really comes in handy for that. On top of that, you get Butcher, which also when the enemy's below 25% health, you increase your light and heavy attacks by another 5%, making that a total of 30% damage increase on light and heavy attacks. Moving on down here, we have Master at Arms, which is at 56 points, increasing our direct damage done by 20%. Remember, all light and heavy attacks are increased by 20%, or are considered direct damage. So that's 20% there. That is another 30 or 25, which is 45%. If I get this, that is 50% damage from my light and heavy attacks. But let's not stop there. Let's move on. We got Mighty over here at 43 points and increase physical, poison, and disease damage by another 10%. That includes light and heavy attacks. So not only is it increased by 50%, but also another 10%, making it 60%, or 55% without. And that's fine. 55% is still pretty good, especially when you have an extra 10% crit for using a two-handed, and you have an extra 10% crit from this, making it 20% critical damage on top of the 50% you get, which is 70% extra critical damage. And your tank can hit for a ton of damage with light and heavy attacks. Alright, moving on. We have 28 here, giving us a 2,542 increase in physical penetration, which is really, really good. But we also have this, of course, for 10% in critical heals as well. So your Vigor can hit for 10% more, and your Rally can hit for 10% more. On top of that, your Rally can also hit for another 10% for having Aedric Spear ability equipped, which makes it 20%. So 70% increase in critical healing from Rally. Thaumaturge. Increase your damage done with damage over time effects by 10%. Nothing else really increases it. But that is it for the champion points. There is a reason for everything in this build, and I just explained all of them. This build is a self-sustaining tank. That means you do not need to have a healer if you don't want to, but it's good to have one just to cover your butt. So let's go ahead and take a look at this build in action. So the way it starts is you want to keep Rally up pretty much all the time. The reason why is because if it does start to taper off and you take a big chunk of health, you can boost your healing up with that. So start with two-handed, go into a fight, do this, and then taunt that, drop your circle, and then heavy attack. The reason why you're going to be focusing on heavy attacks is because of how much damage your character can do with heavy attacks. And that is only if you crit. So if you crit, you can actually get a decent amount of damage out of this character from heavy attacks. And as you guys can see, I can pretty much take all this stuff on and take a beating like it's no tomorrow. No offense to those out there. Again, there's a multitude of ways you can do this build, but it's basically you want to keep your damage shields up, and you want to keep rally up as well. So keeping that rally applied really helps. And as you can see, I'm gonna let this guy go ahead and hit me with that. Oops, sorry about that, buddy. So this, as you can see, I'm actually not even like he's hitting me, and I can actually pop rally. There it goes, 2k health heal right there. And like I said, rally can hit you upwards to 10 or 15 or 20k crits. It's pretty crazy. It depends on how long you let it rest for. Now, when it comes to taking on multiple enemies, it's time to show you what this thing's all about. So, when you're in a trial setting or a dungeon setting, remember, you're going to be fighting multiple trash mobs. Hello, boys and girls. Would you like to play? Now, you can also switch out one of your abilities for the ranged taunt if you need it. But honestly, this build doesn't need it because of that. And as I said, the damage shields from this is pretty insane. And this is just from enemies around me. I could show you in a trial setting if you'd like. I could go into all, whatever, any of the trials really, and show you how it holds up in them without a group or with a group. It doesn't matter. You're still going to get the high damage shields because of it. So that's pretty much Meridia's Guardian and how it works. There is changes that will always happen in every update because of this. And this build I am not changing from this date forward. If you guys want to know how to make it for a solo build, it's really simple. All you have to do is leave this stuff the way it is and craft yourself a gladiator's helm. Well, I crafted a gladiator's thing, and I do have a helm down here. But I do have Plague Doctor's shoulders because I didn't want to craft the shoulders. So you can switch this out like this, and then you can go for a solo build. Let me get up here and find my gladiator boots. So now my build is set up for solo play. And all I have to do now is go with this sword on the front bar. Not there. Not there. Thank you. And then I can grab a bow. So I can actually run this build as both a PvP and a or PvE solo build, a PvP build. Because of the way I stack damage shields, I do just like a Sork does in PvP. I can stack shields just like them, and because of that, I can go into PvP while maintaining the extra damage. So just so you guys can see the damage of this weapon, right now it's 2250, and that's without rally, I believe. So here it is with rally, 3128. Oops. And as long as you have the right setup, like I said, you can pretty much solo anything with this build in the game, besides trials and some dungeons. You can solo all content in the game with this build just like it is right now. You can play any of the quests, you can play any of the overland content, any of the delves, public dungeons, world bosses. Pretty much all of them can be soloed with this build. You just have to learn the mechanics of the build and how it works. And if you go with the bow, what I would do is switch out these two skills. I would switch out for focused aim to get that extra spell and physical penetration in there. And then I would use Endless Hail right here. And then I would probably trade out Repentance, to be honest, or trade out Vigor for Repentance because you don't really need it. Or if you're playing with another person and you need a taunt, you can go with the Undaunted taunt. And I always go with Inner Beast because it's stamina based, because I need the Magicka for the other stuff. And having that low cost ability for the taunt isn't so bad. It's pretty good setup, like I said. This build is really great for any kind of person who loves the Templar class. It allows for some great solo play. You can also do everyone's favorite Maelstrom Arena with this build. If you know the Maelstrom Arena mechanics, you can do it on vet and normal mode with this build. It is, you're not going to get a super high score on vet mode or normal mode, but you can play through them and you can get the rewards from them. So, but yeah, it's a really, really cool build, really fun to play. And like I said, once you get the two-handed up there, why did you get on your horse? Once you get the two-handed up there and you get the gold two-handed and you buff it up, you'll see that you get 2638, and then that extra little bit of weapon damage is going to put you over 3000, and that'll make that brawler shield even more powerful. Also makes your rally heal for a lot more. So my rally is really, really great. But also I want to show you guys this. There's a reason why I do have all these points in here also, is for Reposit. Reposit grows in strength based on weapon damage, max stamina. I thought it grew on max magicka and max spell damage, but it doesn't seem to work as well or get that high of effect unless you can really push those things. But it's on a 15% chance, and I block a lot, so, and getting that extra damage in there really helps, especially when you have that damage shield from Blazing Shield going, and that thing procs its two things, and then you block, and it pops that extra damage from Reposit. Holy cow, you're talking like 15k really quick. It's like rapid fire. And yeah, I've dropped enemies with it, so in dungeons. That's pretty cool. But that's pretty much it for the build, guys. That is Meridia's Guardian. It is the probably only tank that can be played this way because of design. The Templar class is the only one that can be played, that can play this particular build that way. DKs can pull off something similar, but they're not as powerful. Wardens can pull off something similar, but not as powerful because they don't have that extra damage shield. So you would have to get Bone Shield, and Bone Shield is going to cost you an extra chunk in stamina, which can actually be pretty painful. Now this one only goes, grants you a 33% damage shield. It doesn't grow in strength based on anything else. The reason I say it's one of the most powerful shields is because of the synergy, and that's because it gives everybody in your group a shield based on 60% of their max health. So if their max health is 20k, they're going to get a 10k max shield. Pow. It's pretty powerful. Actually, it's going to be a little bit more, but that's the point. So that's it for the build. Again, if you guys enjoyed this video, hit that like button. We greatly appreciate it. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can hit that subscribe button. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy will see you all later. Bye.